días. Bueno, muy buenos días. Voy a dar unas palabras de bienvenida en nombre de la Secretaría de Estado de Telecomunicaciones y para la Sociedad de la Información, que actuamos como anfitriones de este evento organizado por ETSI sobre oportunidades de negocio en la normalización para las pymes. Sencillamente quería daros la bienvenida a todos, señalaros que la Secretaría de Estado está encantada de colaborar en cualquier tipo de iniciativa que sirva para promover el desarrollo del sector y de las nuevas tecnologías, como es este concreto, y estamos especialmente interesados en este evento por la importancia que puede tener para las pymes, que son una parte fundamental del tejido empresarial español y que estamos interesados en potenciar al máximo. Únicamente quería hacer una advertencia de tipo logístico. Me han señalado que para facilitar la labor de los intérpretes tengamos cuidado en hablar despacio y con claridad y utilizando bien los micrófonos, hablando con cercanía a ellos. Entonces, bueno, pues lo digo para facilitar el desarrollo de las jornadas. Y sin más, pues paso la palabra a Fernando Soriano, que introduce el contenido de las jornadas. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias, Ángel, muchas gracias al Ministerio y a la Secretaría por esta colaboración y prestarnos las instalaciones. Yo querría también dar las gracias a ETSI y a normalización por haber organizado este evento, y simplemente muy brevemente voy a hacer una pequeña introducción de por qué estamos aquí, por qué está ETSI aquí. Esto es como si dijéramos la conclusión o uno de los pasos avanzados de los proyectos que lleva ETSI, de ver ETSI junto con la Comisión Europea, DG Enterprise, la Dirección General de Empresas, de ver qué se puede hacer para que la innovación, la investigación y el desarrollo converjan en algo útil por medio de los estándares tecnológicos. A partir de ese estudio que tuvo lugar alrededor del 2007 o 2008, nos dimos cuenta de que mucha de la innovación está basada en las pequeñas empresas, son las que de verdad tienen la capacidad de innovar, se mueven en el medio de innovar, para ellos es fundamental. Y entonces decidimos contar a las pequeñas empresas lo que es la estandarización y cómo a través de la estandarización, la normalización técnica, se puede conseguir hacer negocio. Yo me empeñé en que España sería el primero, en parte por dar a las pymes españolas la oportunidad que yo no tuve hace 30 años, cuando monté mi empresa, y esto para mí era absolutamente desconocido. Entonces me gustaría que vosotros tuvierais la oportunidad de escuchar las conclusiones de los análisis que se han hecho y entender cómo se puede hacer negocio participando en la estandarización, las de las patentes, las comunicaciones y los contactos que se tienen con los clientes. Y si me permitís, voy a presentar a los que estamos aquí encima de la mesa. A mi derecha tenemos a Utan Mulligan, es director en ETSI. A mi izquierda tenemos a Johan Stetskal. Johan es responsable en normalización, que es la Asociación Europea de Pequeñas Empresas. Vuelvo a mi derecha y ahí tenemos a Ángel Bóveda, que es miembro del board de ETSI, el consejo de dirección de ETSI y socio en Wireless Partners. Y bueno, a la izquierda final está Ángel León, a quien ya conocéis. Y si os parece, paso a dar la palabra a Utan Mulligan, que es el que os va a contar las conclusiones de los estudios y lo que ETSI ofrece para las pequeñas empresas. Permíteme, Uta, que diga que hemos tenido que hacer unos pequeños cambios en la agenda de última hora. Entonces, la agenda que os han entregado a Teresa en la entrada no es la que vamos a utilizar. Uta, if you could please display the agenda, because there's some changes, so at least you can take a look. O nos podéis dar los puntos, ¿vale?
Okay. Right, I'll switch to English, because I'm not a Spanish speaker. For those of you who need it, there is a translation. You can use the headphones. I'd like to give you an overview of what ETSI is, how we develop our standards, and some feedback on SMEs, small, medium enterprises in European language, and how they work inside ETSI. So firstly, ETSI, who are we? We are the European Telecommunications Standard Institute. So we are one of the 3 European standards organizations. We're recognized by the European Commission as a body which can develop and publish European standards. Of course, we do much more than simply European standards. Most of our work is technical specifications and other technical documents. We have activities in all areas of ICT, information and communication technology. So we set standards for telecommunication, obviously, it's in our name, but also radio communications, all aspects of radio technologies used in Europe. Broadcasting, you may not know, but the digital video broadcasting DVB project standards for the digital terrestrial and digital satellite TV are published through ETSI, and other subjects in that area. We're recognized by the European Commission, but we are an independent organization made up of member companies and member entities like universities or research bodies or just industry. And also governments are members of ETSI. And they effectively own ETSI, so they decide what happens in ETSI, these members. They decide what work takes place, what standards are written, what standards are not written. So this is really an independent organization. We do receive some money from the European Commission, but most of our money comes from our members. We are obviously a non-organization. Our objective is to make standards, not to make money. As I said, all of our members decide on what standards. We have a direct participation model in. We have a direct participation model in standardization, which means that each member company in ETSI decides which committees it goes to and what activity takes place in that committee. Each individual company has a say. We don't use a national delegation principle. So each organization represents itself. We have, I think at this stage now, more than 30,000 publications. It was 30,000 in December, but we publish several hundred every month. All of our standards are available for free on the internet. You just download them. Of course, we don't work alone. We have to collaborate with a number of other standards bodies. So we have a network of agreements, cooperation agreements with other standards bodies in Europe, but also throughout the world. Either regional bodies, such as in the US, such as in China or in Japan, or global bodies on a particular technical subject. I mentioned our radio standardization. In fact, any radio product placed on the market in Europe must comply with some or other ETSI European standard or technical specification, because for radio aspects, our standards are used by the European Commission in their regulation. They refer to our standards. It's the regulation, the law, which makes the standard obligatory. It's not the standard itself which is law. But in fact, industry participating in our standards committees has a very strong influence on the radio regulations that apply in Europe. What are we not? Well, I've mentioned regulations. As I said, we do provide technical standards which are used by regulators, but we are not a regulatory body. We don't create laws and rules. All our standards are voluntary. We do not provide certification. If you see a product which has ETSI certified or certified by ETSI on it, please tell me, because we need to get that product removed. It's not allowed. However, other certification bodies may claim to certify products to ETSI standards. That's okay. Then they use their certification mark. You see on devices, you'll see a CE marking certificate of the ETSI standards. It could be CEN or CENEL standards, but there it's a claim of conformity to European standards. I mentioned how industry can influence radio regulations in Europe by being involved in the ETSI technical committees, but we do not allocate frequencies. We do not decide and how it's used throughout Europe. Still actually a national decision, but very strongly coordinated at European level, and ETSI is involved in the discussion and in the coordination, but we don't make the decisions there. And as I said in the beginning, we are not part of the European Commission. We are independent and not for profit. But of course we work very closely, though they don't actually have a vote in ETSI. And of course they pay us a certain amount of funding. So what do we offer? Well, obviously we offer standards, specifications, support to regulation by being involved in the regulatory dialogue in Europe. We also develop a lot of test specifications in ETSI as one and of interoperability events, which I think I will refer to a bit later on. Specifically, what standards and specifications will you see out there with the ETSI brand on it? Most of what you will see will be what we call ETSI technical specifications. They'll be TS and then a number after it. They are the ones which are the fastest to publish, the most common ETSI deliverable. You'll find technical reports as well and group specifications. The next level up, approved by all of them, because usually people want a quick specification, so a technical specification, or they want the full European standard voted upon in each European country, and that's when you see EN and then some numbers after it. That is a European standard, and it has been voted on in each of the European countries. Okay, so you've heard something about the name ETSI, but where do you see ETSI every day without even knowing it? Well, the GSM standards, actually they didn't start in ETSI, they started before ETSI was created, but within a year, 2 years of ETSI, of the GSM standards being started, ETSI was created and GSM moved into ETSI, and then ETSI basically developed all of the GSM family, and we then founded what we call the Third Generation Partnership Project. It's a partnership between ETSI and a number of other regional standards bodies throughout the world to develop 3G and now 4G, or LTE as we call it, which is being rolled out in Europe. So every day you take out your phone, you have a whole heap of ETSI standards in your pocket or in your handbag built into your phone. There are thousands of standards which define GSM and the 3G system, not just the phone, but also the entire network and how it operates and inter-network communications. Everything there is standardized. If you have a cordless phone at home, then almost certainly at this stage it's a DECT phone, digital enhanced cordless telecommunications. That started out again inside ETSI. It's still in ETSI. Angel is one of the key people behind the standardization of this technology. It's now become a commodity technology. It's used throughout the world. I think in Spain it's the case that the police and emergency services use Tetra mobile radio. Certainly it's used in in most countries inside Europe, but it's now also exported worldwide. This is a specialized private mobile radio system which was really designed for emergency services but can be used for other private communications as well. Lawful interception, in practically all countries, network operators have a legal requirement to allow the judicial or police services or whatever to intercept calls or data. We have standardized the means to do this. Why? Because there's no profit in it for a network operator, and there's no profit in it for an equipment manufacturer. The idea is to make the process as simple and cheap as possible. It's something that everybody has to do, every network operator has to do throughout the world, so we standardize this interface. And there's a large program of electronic signature standardization ongoing between ETSI and CEN, in particular, our partner standards body in Brussels. Some of the things that we like to believe, the innovations that we've brought to the standards world, we believe we can actually be very fast in developing our standards. In theory, it can take anything down to 2 months between the start of a standards project and the publication of a standard. Of course, it often takes longer because it takes longer to actually come to a consensus inside a standards committee, which is what we would prefer. We prefer to have consensus rather than division inside our standards committees. All our standards available for free on the internet. We used to charge for them. Many fora and consortia give them away for free. We now do the same. We want people to use our standards. Basically, that's what we want. We try and do as much of electronic working as possible. So, for example, we do a lot of email lists. All our meetings are electronic. We can have virtual meetings by conference call and whatnot. We've put a lot of investment into electronic means of working. And our intellectual property rights policy is, again, probably in the news recently because of some debates that you may have heard. But we consider it to be world leading. It's well tested. And we have a database of all of the claims for essential intellectual property, which we make available to the public on our website. The reason is we want there to be transparency and visibility as to who owns or who claims which intellectual property for which standard. We don't want this information hidden. We want it to make it available so that companies can choose to invest in a technology knowing what licenses they may need to obtain. I mentioned testing earlier. We have a Center for Testing and Interoperability which provides specialist advice to our technical committees on how to test or how to develop test specifications for their standards, for their protocols. We also use this group to develop best practices and languages, and they have developed some of the languages which are used in testing and specification, the high-level languages. We also offer a service of organizing interoperability events. Rather than doing detailed testing of products, we find it's also just as important to verify that products interoperate, can communicate to each other. So we organize a lot of these under the plug tests, under the plug test brand. I mentioned we have companies who are members of ETSI, obviously not just companies, universities, research bodies, government departments, agencies. On the company side, manufacturers, network operators, content providers, consultancies, all levels of organization. Effectively, any legal entity can be a member of ETSI. We have at the moment, the last count, 759 member organizations. And about 25% of our members are actually small, medium enterprises, small companies. Our membership is worldwide. It's not just European. Obviously, most members come from Europe, but we have a large number from North America, from China, from Japan. We also have some other Asian countries. So what we call a powerful and dynamic mix of membership. This here is a list of members. I won't go through it completely. I won't read it. That's half of it. The other half is here. But you can find the list of members of ETSI on our website also. And I believe you'll have copies of these slides. I think we'll post them on the webpage after this event. We have tried to organize our technical activities in an easy to understand way. We call them ETSI clusters, and the colors help here as well. Basically, we picked a high-level theme around which we're doing a number of different standards projects. So, for example, in home and office, you'll find technologies which are commonly used either as consumer technologies or in offices or indoor environments. So things like in-building networks, things like DECT, short-range radio, you'll find in home and office. Better living with ICT, it's green, so obviously you would expect to find in there the work that we're doing on making our mobile networks, our fixed networks, and our devices much more energy efficient. So energy efficiency is in there. Wireless systems, you'd expect to find all of the 3G and 4G standardization, but again also DECT and anything radio. And interoperability, you'll expect to find all of the testing activities in under there. So these high-level names, we call them clusters, group several bodies, several technical committees together, because we love names of technical committees in ETSI, but nobody outside ETSI understands these. But these things we hope people will understand. So you'll see this being gradually rolled out on our website and in all our communication. But specifically, the areas that we're involved in are very wide-ranging. I mean, I won't read through this list, but you can see that it goes from the pure telecoms aspects in terms of networks and broadband and next-generation networks and whatnot, onto grid or cloud networks or electronic signatures, or even broadcast technologies that I mentioned, satellite communications, we have a committee dedicated to this, aeronautical communications, radio communications from air to ground and ground to air communications, also maritime radio, maritime distress radio, radio beacons, you know, things, areas which you would not expect to find, you will find standardized in ETSI. We also have a number of guides which are available for either our members or chairmen or meeting delegates. So if you are active in ETSI, then you can actually get some help in terms of specific guides for a chairman, what sort of things should you do. An ETSI member official contact, if you are an ETSI member and you're an official contact, in other words, the prime contact person, we have a guide as to what you can do in ETSI, what we expect you to do, what sort of communication you'll get from us, this sort of thing. All of these are available on our portal. These are direct links to them. You'll get them in the presentations. And of course, our website. We have our main ETSI website, but also we have a portal which is used for all of the technical body activities. So it's really the work interface, the work website for ETSI, where our technical committees work, where our delegates work, rather than the publicity public website. Then 3GPP, the third generation partnership project for everything mobile, is also there. So that then is this may be a bit more reliable. Sorry. That's a general overview on ETSI. What I would like to do now is to go through some specific information about small and medium enterprises in ETSI. Should I ask for some questions now, or do you want to wish for them afterwards? It's okay to ask a question in Spanish. Fernando will translate or answer directly.
Si alguien tiene alguna pregunta ahora.
Yeah, that's okay. In any case, there will be plenty of time for discussions afterwards. Okay, so now I'd like to talk specifically about the subject which has brought us here, SMEs. In English, this is small and medium-sized enterprise. In the European Union, it's the same, I think, in Spain, because it's the standard definition. The definition of an SME is basically any company with less than 250 employees or less than 50 million euros in revenue or 40-something million euros in capital or whatever. We have a standard definition for that in Europe, but basically we think of small industry here. Perhaps startups, perhaps family-owned companies, perhaps one man on his own or one woman on her own as a consultant or whatever, but all of this is important to ETSI, to have this variety. Okay, so to recap, why are standards important? I haven't actually mentioned this earlier. Obviously, we want standards for economies of scale. That's where standards started out life, to lower costs, because you can then, if you standardize certain products, you can reuse them, or certain components, you can reuse them in other devices, so you lower costs, you get an economy of scale. You get sometimes a higher quality and interoperability and confidence in a product, in particular if you have standards coupled with certification. If you have standardized products, you can also have increased competition. Think, for example, of the mobile networks that we used to have before GSM was created. There were about 5 or 6 different mobile network standards being used in Europe alone. There was another 1 or 2 in the US, there was another 2 in Japan. Each standard was pushed by, they weren't even standards, they were specifications, they were pushed by single manufacturers, single network operators. That had huge cost, but it also meant that one manufacturer of a mobile phone device was focused on one technology, and so he had a limited market, which meant that you could never have a lower product cost, which means you had relatively low sales being low competition, fewer choice for the consumer, or less choice for the consumer. The advent of standards allowed, for example, access to new markets. Do you think European mobile phone manufacturers would have any access to the Chinese market unless the Chinese were also using GSM, which they do? Also, especially in the ICT domain, innovative cooperation is what we call, basically a lot of the innovation in the ICT domain is networked innovation. People build on top of other people's inventions. People make use of other people's inventions. So in fact, by having standardized development of technology, you can reuse technology and go to the next level in your innovation. So effectively, everything we do about standards is a business decision. It's basically all about turning ideas into commercial success. So we have one of our catchphrases in ETSI is standards for business, because behind all of our standards there is a decision by companies to put time and effort into making a standard, because they see that they will be better off with the standard than without it. Now, we know, especially in the domain of ICT, practically every product or service that we use is somehow built upon standards, whether they are formal standards that come out of an organization like ETSI, whether they are standards from fora and consortia, or industry standards, or even de facto standards like some operating systems have become. Everything is standardized in our industry. So if we have companies developing technology in Europe in the ICT domain, then if they want to develop really new products, new services, new markets, then they ought to be looking at driving standardization work. Because if they're not doing it, their competitor will be doing it and creating new products, new markets through standardization. And it's not simply attending a committee to look at what's going on, it's actually driving the work forward. pushing the standards committee in the direction that you want it to go. Now, SMEs in Europe, I mentioned earlier, they're very important. We have 99% of European companies are small, medium-sized enterprises, and they're responsible for some 70% of employment. These are statistics, I think, from the European Commission's Observatory of SMEs. There is somehow a belief that these small companies can't or don't participate in standardization. Now, I'm not sure where that comes from, because in our experience in ETSI, it's not at all true. We have many examples of SMEs who not only participate, but lead standardization activities, have managed to develop themselves, their company, through being identified with a standards project, with leading a standards project. In Europe, for some reason, we have a focus on participation via national standards organizations, which is fine for many industries. But it doesn't fit the ICT industry, because the ICT industry is by definition a global industry. It's not specifically European. And we're not the only standards body in the ICT industry. We have the ITU based in Geneva. We have the IEEE in the US, which is now active everywhere. We have the IETF for internet standards, W3C, all of the web HTML standards that you use in your browser, they're all developed by W3C. OASIS, a partner organization dealing with web-based standards. How does a European national-based standards participation model work with these organizations? It doesn't. And yet you as a company, as an SME, you will choose to go to the standards body that develops the technology that is important for you, where you will also find other companies with the same interests. So, for example, you're never going to get HTML standardized in ETSI. It will not happen. We have never standardized it. It's done in W3C. So even if we had a national standardization model, companies who wanted to participate in HTML standardization cannot do it. They have to go directly to the W3C. Likewise, for all of the technologies in ETSI, it's a direct participation model. I think Angel will say something about this afterwards. And of course, becoming an ETSI member as a small, medium enterprise, it's not simply about getting involved, about putting in your input. There are actually a number of other benefits to participating in standardization. And this is what we wanted to explore in ETSI. What were these other benefits? And also, what challenges do small companies face in participating in a standards body? So we believe that for a small, medium enterprise, for a small company, if you are to do standardization, if you are going to invest time and money into participating in standards, you must consider this to be part of your business process. You must link your standardization activity to all aspects of activities in your company, your research, your development, but also your marketing activities and your promotion or sales activities. And the reasons you'll see in a moment, why it's actually so important to link everything together. It is a way of putting your technology into a standard, in theory. It can be more difficult in practice, but that would either give you a return on your investment or allow you to secure your investment by at least preventing other competing technologies to take its place. Actually, standardization gives you a huge amount of information. Participating in a standards committee gives you an enormous amount of competitive intelligence that you cannot get anywhere else. And as a small company, you need to be able to harvest this information. It's one of the biggest, most valuable aspects of participating in standards. You get information through coffee break discussions. All your competitors are there in the standards committee, plus also potential customers. But also you should look at what contributions, what standards documents are being prepared by other companies and judge where they are in their development cycle based on what they're contributing. So you need to send a standards delegate who's capable of doing this. It's a place to form partnerships with other companies in terms of, for example, a sales partnership or a platform partnership where you build your product on top of another organization's, or it's coupled with it. So you don't actually negotiate anything such inside the standards committee, but it's a way to get information about what other companies to partner with. Your competitors are sitting around the standards table, but also potential customers. So it's a way to know who they are and what they need from you. Again, you don't go in direct selling through a standards committee, that's not allowed. But it does give you a visibility to your customers that you wouldn't otherwise have. When you're sitting around a standards committee table, you have basically a group of highly qualified engineers. They see each other as highly qualified engineers. They don't see each other as representative of a big company or of a small company. So in fact, if you have a highly technical competent engineer or standards delegate who has good ideas, who actively contributes, his input is appreciated. So his technical competence will count for a lot, much more than the simple size of your company. I mentioned SMEs in ETSI. About a quarter of ETSI's members are small or medium-sized enterprises, or even micro-enterprises with less than 10 employees. They make up 10% of our members. So we're not just an organization for big companies. We have reduced our membership fees for small, medium enterprises so that the membership fee will not be the barrier to participation. The real barrier is the cost of time and travel that you have to put in to go to our standards meetings. For a larger company, we ask them to pay anywhere between almost 10,000 euros to up to 154,000 euros for the very biggest companies. For an SME, we ask them to pay 6,000 euros a year, and for a micro-enterprise, we ask them to pay 3,000 euros. While this may seem a certain amount, it's nothing compared with the cost of time if you're really going to participate actively in a standards project. Our SME members join ETSI to really participate, so most of them do actively participate in our committees. They come to our standards meetings, they turn up in our workshops, they submit contributions, they're active on the email lists. They don't simply pay the 6,000 euros and say, you know, I have the ETSI badge here, but that's it. They actually really do participate. We believe about 10% of the official positions in ETSI, chairman, vice chairman, secretary, are held by representatives of small, medium enterprises. These are very influential positions. They can actually shape the work that's ongoing inside a technical committee. So if we were an organization dominated by large industry, then you would have 0% here. We also have a seat on our ETSI board, which is a 26 person board of ETSI directing the day-to-day affairs. One seat on that board is reserved for a representative of SMEs. In practice, we have one seat on the board reserved for SMEs, but another seat seems to be regularly elected for the European organization which represents SMEs in standardization, NORMAPME, and Johan Stetskal will be saying a few words about that later. We held a study recently on looking to see what were the real benefits of SMEs to participate in ETSI beyond the ones I've listed already, and what were the barriers that SMEs faced. We think we know them, but of course we really should actually ask SMEs to find out. So we had a study in 2009 and 2010 on this. We looked basically to study SME performance in standardization. So we did a survey of SMEs, then we also did some detailed case studies talking directly to specific SMEs to find out what their conclusions were, what their recommendations were. We found that okay, we looked at SMEs who use standards but don't really participate in them, and we found that, of course, people use them primarily for technical compatibility, in other words, to comply with some regulation or some requirement, or to fulfill a customer requirement. In other words, the SME themselves wasn't too worried about the standard, but the customer was enforcing it, or to get an additional market advantage. These are reasons which you would more or less expect to see. The next one is interesting. SMEs don't simply use standards from the formal standards bodies like ourselves, ETSI, or CEN, or CENELEC, or ISO, or IEC. They also use a lot of industry alliances. I would classify IETF or W3C or organizations like that in this group of industry alliances. Quite a large number seem to use proprietary specifications, in other words, customer requirements, customers' own standards. For example, in the motor industry, you will have many of the motor manufacturing groups like GM or Volkswagen or whatever. They will have their own standards, which you will have to comply with if you want to supply to them. Of the benefits and reasons for participating in standards, we found some interesting things. Okay, the reasons to participate, many SMEs thought they wanted to drive the standard in a particular direction. Gaining advanced technological knowledge, knowing what's in the standard before your competitors do, that was very important. That's a competitive intelligence. But also knowing what's not in the standard, knowing what's not written, knowing what has been discussed in the committee but had choices that have been eliminated, or the knowledge that you need to have in order to implement the standard but is not actually written in the standard. This is competitive intelligence that you can get out of participating in a standards committee. Especially in the radio field, if you participate in the standards, you can influence regulation because the standards are used by the regulators. Some were just participating in order to please their customers, for interoperability, and also to gain a marketing advantage. If there's a strong marketing campaign behind a technology that is funded by larger industry, then if you're a small company, you can piggyback on top of that. You can make use of that marketing effort. The benefits that they saw were a better vision of what is done by the competition. As I said, competitive intelligence, which you cannot get anywhere else, at least for this price. Again, a competitive advantage compared with companies who haven't participated in the standards activity. They actually found that they got new ideas from discussions with their peers in the standards committee. That's interesting. It actually generated some ideas as to what they should be doing. The benefits, they did actually see an increase in market potential, an increase in contacts with customers. So it wasn't just, we believe that you will get this. No, they said we got increased market potential, increased contact with customers, increased reputation. This is something which came out very strongly in a number of, in this survey plus a number of others that we have looked at. The reputational value, the name that your company gets by being involved in standards, you get taken seriously by being active in a standards committee. Your customers look at you as a company and say, yes, they've been involved in the standards, they know what they're talking about, they've influenced the activity, this is a company I can trust, they've been there for the long haul. That increase in reputation is directly related to the market potential and contacts with customers. It's something we underestimated, and it came out very strongly in the survey. Networking opportunities, again for customers or for partnerships, that was important. Increased commercial possibilities, exposure to new industry best practices. That is also something which came out very strongly, and again we didn't quite understand it, but it's related to the new ideas. As a small company, it may be sometimes difficult to get access to the latest technologies, to get exposure to the best practices, because you don't have such an international exposure. Through a standards committee, you get that exposure. By talking to the other companies there, bigger and smaller than you, you get that exposure. Now, we had some advice from companies who do actively participate in the standards activities in ETSI as to what you should think about if you're really interested in getting involved in standardization. The first question, which surprised us actually, but came out very strongly again, was the level of English, the competency in English. All of our activities in our standards committees in ETSI, but not just in ETSI, in SEN, in SENELEC, in every other standards body that I know of, apart from the national standards organizations, it's all conducted through English. And the point that was made by the companies that we surveyed was that it's not simply enough to be fluent in speaking and writing. No, you've got to be able to debate. You've got to be able to defend your company, your technology through English. You've got to be able to think on your feet and argue in English. That was the difficult thing. So if you're choosing somebody to get involved in the standards activity for your company, look at his skills in English. If you attend some of our standards committees, okay, I'm a native English speaker, so maybe I can criticize, the level of English is not perfect. So in fact, it's not essential that you have people who speak perfect English, but they must be able to have enough confidence to debate, to argue in English, and they must be able to understand the English, sometimes not so good English, of the other people around the table. So it's more a question of competence and negotiation skills in English than simply perfect English. Intellectual property rights is something that you should be aware of. We have in ETSI quite a detailed intellectual property rights policy. If you're going to get involved in the standardization activity, then I would strongly recommend you read that. We have a guide on intellectual property rights, a guide to antitrust or to preventing antitrust behavior. All of this should be looked at quite carefully. We had some companies in the survey who replied that IPR was not a problem at all, that they weren't even aware of any issues, which gave us the feeling that maybe they had their eyes closed, and there were other companies who had issues with this. So it's something that you should look at quite seriously, look at our policies and look at what is done in your field. The big difficulty for an SME is, of course, to run the standardization activity in parallel with any innovation that you may be doing. Standardization process can take time, and waiting for the standard to be finished before you can put a product on the market is probably too long for an SME. On the other hand, I've had it explained to me by a number of SMEs that they initially took the approach that yes, we want to put a product on the market which is conformant with this standard, but the standard took too long. And so they had some difficulties during this process. But then, looking back, they realized they got more value out of simply being involved in the standards process throughout the development phase of the standard. They got more business by being involved in the process than they got out of being or having a product conformant with the standard at the end. In other words, if they were to go through the process again, the objective would not be the standard, the objective would be the standardization process, being involved in the process, talking to the other companies, getting known through being involved in the standards committee. That was what was most valuable. So if you're only fixed on, I must have this standard in order to bring my product out, but the standard is too slow and I need to develop sales to stay alive, then look at it a different way. The process brings you more value. We, of course, had small companies warning us of the larger players taking a dominant position, and that does happen. I mean, it's the same on the market. We can't really prevent this. The next point on a critical mass was also important. You need to be reasonably solid as a company even a small company, before getting involved in the standardization activity. It's a long-term activity, so you need to be able to fund the participation, not just the ETSI membership fees, but also the cost of travel, the cost of time for your experts or your engineers who are going to the standards committees. So you need also to be sure that you have chosen the right standards committee, the right standards project. There is a certain risk involved. You back the wrong horse, you lose. So you need to be careful. You maybe need some people with some experience in this inside your company who have had practice in other standards committees and know which way the industry might be going. So you really need to be a sustainable company before going down the path of standardization. And you need to be sure that it's the right standardization process. A slide perhaps I could have put a bit earlier. Again, looking back on small medium enterprises in ETSI, where are they from actually? This might interest you. We have most of the SMEs that are ETSI members. 20% of ETSI's small companies members are from the UK, 14% from Germany, 13% from France. Actually, 10% of the SMEs are from the US, believe it or not. In other words, these are small companies, the same size as us here, who decide to participate in ETSI. They think it's worth their while to travel transatlantic. Even Italy, we have 6% of the SMEs in ETSI are from Italy, whereas in the case of Spain, unfortunately, it's only 2%. We have only got 4 of the 20 members of ETSI from Spain, and these members are not just industry, these are universities, and we also count the ministry here as a member of ETSI. Only 4 of these organizations are SMEs. So obviously we would like some more Spanish members and Spanish SME members in ETSI. We have published a white paper on SMEs and standardization, and there are some web pages with some advice on SMEs which we hope to expand in the future as well. So I just put this slide up here as a reminder of some of the benefits. Is there anything here which we haven't already mentioned? One important one is middle of the technical benefits. It can be difficult as a small company to get suitably competent and qualified people that you don't have to train yourself in a particular technology. In a standards committee, you find a room full of them. So in actual fact, it's a place to find new personnel. We find a lot of standards delegates moving from one company to another. And you also have an opportunity, if you're in the standards committee, to see that delegate in performance. You get an idea of his knowledge, of his capabilities, before you even interview them or approach them about a job. So we find our standards delegates are headhunted from one company to another. And these are companies, small businesses, who have told us these benefits. And this was one of them which we didn't expect. In terms of the commercial benefits, obviously promoting your own technology, getting the time to market right, alliances, partners that we had already mentioned, competitive intelligence, early intelligence, enhanced credibility, the second last on the right. That is so important, that your credibility, your reputation from having been one of the companies who helped write the standard. You know, we wrote the book on that, we defined it, we know how it's done. And by being on the management team of standards activity, by being in the ETSI board, by being a chairman or a vice chair or a secretary of a committee, by being the editor or rapporteur of a specification, you get a visibility which is even higher than simply sitting in the committee. And it's a very easy visibility to get. So that's something which, if you're a small company, you should take very seriously. Get as much visibility through being involved in the standards process as possible. So that completes basically what I have to say to you this morning. Thank you very much. If you don't have questions now, we can always take them either during coffee or afterwards later on this afternoon. Thank you.
So Thank you very much, Yutan. Muchas gracias, Yutan. Antes de presentar a nuestro siguiente participante, permitidme que os diga que cuando vi que el domingo la empresa que fundé hace 30 años no se había apuntado a venir hoy, cogí el lunes, le llamé y me fui para allá a verles. Y bueno, ¿cómo nos habéis apuntado? Y dice, no, es que Fernando, estamos muy ocupados, hemos empezado a vender en Portugal, hemos tenido que rediseñar la placa porque la CPU que usábamos ya no se fabrica. Además, lo que hacemos no es nada estandarizable y nosotros no inventamos nada, son todo pequeñas ideas, ideas simples para el día a día. Y le digo, después de contarle un poco, le digo, Fernando, lo que estás haciendo se está estandarizando en tres campos, el campo de e-health, el campo de machine to machine, en firma digital. Lo que está haciendo es estandarizable. Y las tonterías que inventéis día a día pues son equivalentes a la tontería de sacar el aire de una bombilla, son cosas que son patentables. Entonces, después de explicarle algunas de las cosas que ha contado aquí Yutan, bueno, hoy está aquí. Y espero que, os digo esto porque espero que el mensaje es que cuando, a medida que vayáis viendo las presentaciones y al final del día, tengáis también la idea de que la estandarización, la participación en estandarización es para vosotros, es para las pymes. Tenéis mucho que aportar y mucho beneficio que sacar. Y ahora, si me permitís, os voy a pasar la palabra a Johan Stesgal, que os va a contar cómo hacer estándares mejores para las pymes. Johan, please.
My name is Johann Stesgal. I'm an Austrian citizen and I'm an entrepreneur. So I'm running an ICT company with about 15 employees. I'm located in the southeast of Austria and we are doing ICT solutions for tourism companies like hotels and restaurants. So I'm very familiar with the life of an SME and what are the issues and what are the problems. As a hobby, I started in 2004 to think about how can SMEs can be heard a little bit better on a European level. And so I started to work together with the Chamber of Commerce in Austria and then with other organizations, and at least NORMAP asked me to serve as an expert, and so I'm now 4 years member of the board of ETSI, representing NORMAP, representing an organization which has a clear focus. It's stated here, making standards better for SMEs. Because this is essential for SMEs, not only to take part in the standardization process. There are many of good reasons for SMEs to take directly part in this process. But on the other hand, we have to have a close look on the development of standards so that SMEs can use them. And NORMAP is the organization on a European level who tries to make standards better for SMEs. So what's NORMAP? NORMAP is devoted to the interests of SMEs in all SME relevant sectors. So not only for ICT, but for buildings, for food, any other sector. And from the about 50 NORMAP experts, it's about 5 experts dealing with ICT and 2 experts dealing with ETSI. So not a lot, but we are raising our flag and we are well heard in the organizations, and of course we try to think about our members, how we can serve them best, and how we can make standards available for them, and so that they can easily step in the standardization process or can use standards which are developed here. So NORM-APME was created in 1996 on an initiative of UAPME. UAPME is representing those crafts and SMEs all over Europe, and NORM-APME is part of UAPME and only focusing on standardization. We represent about 12 million enterprises all over Europe, and we are funded by mostly by the Commission. So we have a yearly contract and clear goals which we have to achieve. We have a work program, and we are not NORM-APME is not a big company. It's having 12 employees, and they are located in Brussels. So how we are working and how are the members? NORM-APME is associate member of SEN and SENELEC and full member of ETSI. So we are part of the members of ETSI, and we have a vote. We have one vote, but this vote is heard rather good because we are representing a big community. And NORM-APME members are associations, and these associations are representing SMEs in their countries, but NORM-APME only works on a European level. Here you can see we are only working on European targets and European standards, and so we are focusing on ETSI in the field of ICT and SEN and SENELEC other fields. And of course we are working together in different things. Let's talk about smart grid or ITS. So these are fields where SEN, SENELEC and ETSI work together, fulfilling European mandates, trying to get standards for very important things. I can tell you about the Technical Committee ITS, Intelligence Transport Systems. As you will know, the cars of the future will communicate with each other. We reserved a band about 5.9 gigahertz. It is reserved for the communication between cars. And now we have to develop the standards. And my role as representing of NORM-APME is to have this field open for a lot and many of ICTs, SMEs, who want to step in this market afterwards. So to avoid barriers for SMEs in this specific field. So we are working on this level, and you have seen we have the NORM-APME Secretariat. These are the 12 peoples I mentioned working in Brussels, serving every SMEs which are calling. We try to have as many languages as possible, but of course the main language is English. But it's a little bit a Brussels English or something like this. It's not native English like you heard from Ulton. And Ulton sometimes had really problems to follow us when we, as a Finnish and Spain and Austrian people talking English. But it's not about having an excellent English, but to go forward in our standardization field. So we were talking about language. It's not a big problem not to find the right words, but you make your standpoint clear, and that's the whole thing. And you have to have expertise. And for this expertise, NORM-APME is recruiting experts from Europe, and we have now about 50 experts, and those experts are sitting in the committees and in the SAN-SANELEC committees and ETSI committees to look on the development of those standards, because they are crucial for SMEs. And if you talk about standards about buildings or wood or something else, it's very important for many of those SMEs all over Europe to be part of this development, to be not excluded, to have certifications which are very expensive, and all those things. We are watching those things, and we want to contribute. And of course, and I'm very happy that this workshop is now taking place here in Spain. It's the first workshop. We want to invite SMEs to take part in the standardization process, because we are convinced that this can be a win-win situation. And I can assure you that ETSI very warmly welcomes you, and we from NORMAPME will really try to help to get in this standardization process and to make the first informations. You can be part of the so-called mirror committees. Those mirror committees allows you to get some more information about the technical committees you are interested in. So you don't have to be member of ETSI or member of SEN or member of this committee, but you have some extract what is going on in this committee. And so you have some more information than is available on the website. And so this is the kernel of the work of NORMAPME, these experts and the mirror committees. And then, of course, the communication goes to every member, to every other organizations, SME organizations, and we will hear now the organization located here in Spain. And, of course, to all the standardization bodies. And believe me, we have a good stand in ETSI, and they rely on us, on our expertise, and ask to give the inputs on the table so that SMEs are included, because industry is not really understanding SMEs, the big industry, and so we often have to explain how standards has to be built so that most of SMEs can participate. And that's our common goal, that the standards we are developing are used. And so this is one of my most important roles there, to ensure this. Thanks a lot.
¿Una pregunta? Y si no hay ninguna pregunta, quizás al final sabéis que a las 11:30 pararemos para tener un pequeño café, que es un momento para hablar entre vosotros o con nosotros e intercambiar tarjetas si queréis. Y luego al final de las sesiones también hay media hora de coloquio en la que se pueden hacer preguntas y discutir aquí. La siguiente presentación nos la va a hacer Javier García de